Okay guys, today we're going to look at a little bit of the vocabulary from quadratics. And we did a little bit of this before in the spring before we went on our little quarantine there. But our big thing is I want to make sure this is back in your memory, so as we're starting to solve and be able to do graphing, you're conscious of what it is and you can be able to name it by its name. So you can see right here that I have that graphic organizer that I was talking about. I'm going to fill that out in pieces. Today is only going to be working on filling out the front. And the big thing is when we're done, you should have all of yours filled in. So don't forget, if you need to go through and pause it so you can write stuff down, you need to do that. I'm going to fill mine out as we go. So I just want to make sure that you're doing the same. So first of all, this is one of the templates that I have, and I'm going to start out by filling in the middle. So remember, this is going to be what our topic is. So we're going to do quadratic vocabulary and features. So we're going to talk about the big ideas with quadratics, big vocabulary things, but we're also going to go through and talk about special features about it. Now this is part one. We're going to go to part two to deal with the rest of this. So let's go to our first piece of the template. And again, we're dealing with this. It doesn't matter which one of these that you start with. I would just say wherever you're going to start there and then just move around the circle so that at least it's in some order from the way that you did it. So I'm going to go to my first box. And the very first thing that I want to talk about is the shape. So if I'm talking about a quadratic, it has a horseshoe or a U shape. So when we talk about this, a lot of people tend to call this shape a parabola. And that's just usually the vocabulary they use when they start to talk about it. So you might hear them talk about quadratic, or you might hear them talking about that parabola shape. So either one is okay. Okay, I'm going to move on to my next one. So the next one that I want to talk about is a point called the vertex. Now, a vertex is usually determined by the point HK. That's usually how it's talked about. And there are kind of two different kinds of equations that you can have. Your quadratic equation might be y equals, or it might be x equals. So if it's y equals, if I have a point that's down here, this would be considered to be the minimum. That would be its vertex. I could also have the possibility of it opening up, and that point would be its maximum and would also be the vertex point. Now, when it's x equals, it kind of is a little crazier. So if it's x equals, you might have a point that would be right there. That would be the vertex, and it would be considered the rightmost point. Or it might go this way. Oops. That point would be considered to be the leftmost. Any of those would be considered the vertex point. So if I look at these points right now, I'm going to mark them in white. All four of those are different types of vertex points for a quadratic. Now, if I'm going to go on, I have to be able to not only know where the vertex is, but now I need to start looking at the kinds of pieces that come with this. So first of all, let's go next to our next spot. And the next thing we're going to talk about is called standard form. Now with standard form, we have two options. Depends on if it's y equals, or it depends on if it's x equals. So if it's y equals, my standard formula is going to look like that. Now, the only difference between the y equals equation and the x equals is the x and y's really change spots. So it's going to be ay squared plus by plus c. So you notice that they all have the a's, b's, and c's. The only thing that changes are the x's and y's. Okay, on the next one, we're going to go to our next spot. We're going to talk about vertex form because sometimes it's actually written so it's easy to identify the vertex form. So vertex form, if it's y equals a x minus h squared plus k. Now remember, k is my vertex, so that's why they call this vertex form. If I have x equals, so x equals a y minus k squared plus h. So notice in this, the x's and y's switch, but notice the h and the k does too. And just a big reminder, when they're talking about hk, that is the vertex. That's why if it's written in vertex form, you can sometimes identify it pretty quickly. Okay, we have one more piece of vocabulary that I want us to look at. And that is a special feature of our graph that is called the Directric and Focus. So if I'm talking about the directric is a fixed line outside the parabola. If I were talking about the focus is a fixed point inside your parabola. So I'm going to do a little bit of a sketch here, and then we're going to go through and actually label it. So let's say that I have XY here. That's just my graph. And let's say that I have some quadratic that looks like that. Put a point here. And I'm going to put the directric here. So when I'm talking about the directric is this line. Oops. And the focus is that point. Here's what's kind of cool about this. The distance from this point to the vertex and from the vertex to the directric should be the same. Now, I just kind of eyeballed this, so I can't guarantee it's the same. But this distance right here should be equal to this distance right there. Okay, we'll pick up with vocabulary again tomorrow.